Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode of The Ways We Move. My name is Nicholas Zart, and I am your host on this podcast, and we're going strong, almost a year and a half. I can't believe it. And although I'm changing the pace of the content, instead of once a week, I think I might be going to, well, maybe twice a month. Not because we don't have enough content, because it's the scheduling that's the hardest part. This next guest is someone I've known for a long time, someone I really like in the industry, someone who works a little bit more on the infrastructure side of things to understand what advanced air mobility means, what also it takes to make it happen. And his name is Gael Le Bris, who works at USP. And I'll let him introduce himself. But to give you a little bit of an idea of what we talk about is how complex infrastructure is, and also how interesting that most of the investments are on the vehicle side of things and less so on the infrastructure side of things, specifically considering that, well, without the infrastructure, those investments in vehicles, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do with them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about what it takes to really look at a uniform, coherent way of tackling infrastructure. And also here in the US, what is the difference with Europe? How is Europe going about it in a fairly different way? Of course, we're all going to get to the same place, as well as the rest of the world. I hope you enjoy this. As always, please subscribe. This really helps us. And of course, give us a thumbs up. And also, please drop a comment. Let us know, what do you think? Have you heard about advanced air mobility? Have you heard about these flying cars, air taxis? What do you think of it? What do you think it means for your future? Would you step on an aircraft with no pilot? That's always a great question to get a conversation going. But without further ado, let's hear from Gael, who will tell us a little bit about what WSP does, what they have been doing, and what is going on in our incredibly multifaceted industry. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon again. All right, finally, Gael is on the podcast. How long have we've been trying to get you on the podcast for so long? You're finally
Months.
here, Gael. Gael is a
So
great
happy
friend
to
of
be here.
mine. Gosh, me too, me too. Gael is a great friend of mine. I've known him for many, many years and always very insightful. But we'll let him do the introduction first, okay?
Well, thank you, Nicolas, and thank you, everyone. Glad to be here. Finally, after I think over a year of talking, trying to find a moment for recording this podcast with you, Nicolas. I'm Gael Le Bris. I'm Vice President and Technical Fellow with USP. A very long story short, I'm an aeronautical engineer. I'm a licensed civil engineer as well, former airport operator, and these days working on a broad range of different projects all across the nation and beyond. We're doing master planning for airports. We're supporting aviation stakeholders. We're working, of course, in the realm of advanced air mobility. We've been involved with this journey for a long time now.
Yes.
And if you want, we've been active in the domain of research, supporting projects with national academies, planning, supporting states and operators, and the design of facilities as well. So very exciting. And glad to be here today with you, Nicolas, to talk about advanced air mobility and
Indeed,
future
indeed.
vertical
Uh-oh, I
flight.
think your internet is a little choppy right now. You know, it's
Okay.
I'm glad you it'll be fine. I'm glad you said that. It's true. I think WSP is a company pretty much everybody knows about, but I'm not sure they actually know exactly what you do. And I was just struck about a year or so ago. I saw WSP trucks driving around here in Savannah, and I was thinking, wow, what else do they do? I mean, it's a broad range of diversity that you guys have out there.
No, absolutely. It's a big firm, a big global firm with strong U.S. roots, of course, and we do pretty much everything in engineering and advisory, environment, and else. It's a big consultancy firm, and you might have seen a truck driven by my colleagues. Doing a construction management or a bridge inspection or else. And when it comes to aviation, we do pretty much everything from a strategic advisory to a project delivery. The only thing that we do is that we don't operate facilities. That's pretty much the only segment, if you want, that we don't cover. But everything from a strategic advisory to, again, project delivery, including planning, design, TMCM, and else, we're in.
Yeah, and that's why we get along so well, because that's exactly what I'm happy with: the infrastructure side of things, the planning, the understanding, the development, the conceptualization, all the way down to that when that shovel hits the ground, sort of thing. So I totally understand. Operations, yeah, that's a different sort of person who does that, and it's just not me. I'm not an operations person. So
We do
tell us
understand
a little bit.
operations, but we don't operate
Yes,
ourselves facilities. And
exactly.
I'm myself a
Yeah, and
former airport operator, so I do have a keen interest in operations.
yeah, and in your position, you need to, right? I mean, WSP needs to also understand how to do operations. Of course, in advanced air mobility, especially when you concentrate on infrastructure,
Absolutely.
operations is something you need to fully understand and fully have under your belt. Tell us a little bit more about how did you guys get involved with advanced air mobility? When did that start?
Well, that's an interesting story. From my past life, I did already have a keen interest in vertical flight. But the thing is that when we advise airports and state departments of transportation about aviation, generally speaking, advanced air mobility is coming. What it is exactly and how strong it's coming, and else that's subject to discussion. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment.
Oh, yes.
But it's coming, and our clients have questions. We ourselves have questions as technical folks, if you want. And very early on, we were part of those discussions, on that portion of the future of aviation when it comes to advanced air mobility. And for instance, again, we've been,
Yeah.
for instance, doing research for the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, especially its Transportation Research Board. You can find our guidance documents on
Yes.
advanced air mobility, urban air mobility at airports, electric aircraft and hydrogen technologies, and else on the website of the National Academies. You look for the reports labeled as ACRP, Airport Cooperative Research Program, and you'll find those guidance documents available for free on the National Academy's website. These were, as far as I know, the very first technical guidance documents on the matter when they were released. We've done also research for other clients. Part of it has been shared with AIAA, Vertical Flight Society, and else. You can find that on their website, those research papers. But what we were interested in is not just that research for the sake of doing research, is how we can turn that into actionable items for
There
decision
you go.
making, for planning, for design, for turning that into real stuff, if you want. And we have re-injected that into the conversation that we have with airport operators, state DOTs, and other stakeholders, to see how we can pave the way for advanced air mobility in a way that is meaningful, but also realistic, if you want. That's a
Yeah.
5-minute version of our journey into AAM.
Yes, and so many things you said. I want to jump on and talk a little bit more about it, but it's true that you guys have been doing
Absolutely.
a lot of the deeper work that happens, and this
Yes.
is the part that I think, unfortunately, the public does not see. The public sees press releases. They mostly focus on the vehicles. They don't really see the whole infrastructure aspect behind that, which, as I like to say for the last 10 years, hey, infrastructure is the glue that bonds it all together. Without infrastructure, airplanes without airports, cars without roads, boats without water, trains, locomotives without rails or stations, what do you do with it, right? So you've got to be really
Absolutely.
careful to and this reminds me of something also that we went through in the electric vehicle world, where I was working on from 2006 onwards. But in around 2009, 2010, I couldn't believe how many philosophical discussions we were having about, does the car come first or the charging stations come first? And it was
Chicken and
obvious.
the egg.
Well, yeah, I mean, chicken or the egg. No, guys, it's the egg, okay? I'm sorry. It's the egg. The egg gives the chicken. It's obvious, right? So the charging
Right.
stations, of course, and it didn't. Everybody focused on the cars. And on top of it, we did have a charging standard war that also set back the industry. But I think we easily lost 3 years in
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
adoption of EVs. Now, thank God, gas prices are up, inflation is up, so all of a sudden EVs have a new breath of life. But that's besides the point. But when it comes to aviation, it's a different culture. I mean, safety first, safety foremost, and safety at the end of the day. Tell us a little bit. You said something I want to start focusing on. Is my talks with airports have been, especially here in the United States, have been fascinating. I find that half of them kind of think of, yeah, it's going to happen down the road, but they don't seem to be too much in a hurry to look into it. And then another half is like, yeah, it's being forced upon us. We have to look at it. How do you see the industry, at least here in the United States? Because I know it's very different in Europe.
No, absolutely. And, airport operators, their focus, if you want, their top priority is, of course, to run airports on the day-to-day basis,
Absolutely.
right? It occupies
Yep.
most of their time, most of their brain, safe and efficient operations, pleasant passenger experience and else. That their top priority, of course. But everything else, all the airport professionals that I know, they do their best to keep themselves informed about what's happening
Yes.
in the broader air travel slash aviation business. And they're very well aware of advanced air mobility and else. Now that they do have
Of course.
very sharp questions about
Yes.
the reality of advanced air mobility
Exactly.
because they have limited funding. The
Yeah.
grants that they can get from the federal administration or else, it's limited and tied to very specific conditions. So they see that coming. They hear a lot of buzz about it's going to be the future of aviation. It's going to be that big and else. But they say, oh, hold on. If I need to commit that kind of money what's behind in terms of the reality of the market locally, how it's going to help me to serve my community, and to how it's going to benefit,
Yep.
how it's going to
Yep.
impact my operations, especially when it
Yes.
comes to airside capacity and delay, land use, availability of facilities and else, all of
Yes.
that, are important questions. And today we start having answers around that. There is the FAA,
Yes.
EIPP that is coming strong, and hopefully the connection with commercial service airports is going to be made and tested and evaluated as well. Like this, we'll have maybe a clearer picture of how AAM and legacy airspace users,
Yes.
can coexist. But that's the kind of question that we get from our airport
Yes.
clients. Very very sharp questions, and we
Yes.
are building answers for them and investigating these issues, of course, to provide meaningful guidance.
Yeah, and I think you summed it up really well. My last conversation with a big airport was with the Atlanta airport, and the bottom line was basically we are aware, we're monitoring it, but we're not spending money on it. And it's true. When 99% of your budget goes into runway maintenance, that fence that needs to be replaced and everything, thinking about advanced air mobility is a bit of a stretch. And let alone, by the way, the energy that's going to be needed in 10 years. We calculated roughly that we're going to need about 10 to maybe 50 megawatt of power every day from 5 to 7 o'clock, right? No utilities can produce that or even transmit that, right? Let alone even
Yeah.
give it to us, right? Even if they put a substation, it won't do a thing. So there are a lot of questions, and I understand they're concerned because the budget is that. One thing that I don't understand, and this is perhaps you can help shed some light on that, is the investment business model is so different when it comes to vehicles. Now, for
Yes.
vehicles, you've got billions of dollars going in that direction. And for the most part, you want to talk to these investors and go, hey, guys, have you thought about the important part about those vehicles is they need to operate from somewhere? This is what we call advanced air mobility infrastructure. But if you're going to put $2 to $7 billion in a vehicle and you don't put anything in the infrastructure, pray tell, what will happen? And that's the part I don't understand. Why do we not see the same kind of excitement at the infrastructure level? Is it because infrastructure is not sexy? Do we think of concrete and roads and bridges and tunnels? I don't understand that part. And I don't know how to reach these investors to go, hey, you really need to take that layer into consideration because that's the glue that bonds it all together. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a
How's that
very good
speech?
observation. And first, it's true that the flying vehicles, they get more attention than the payment underneath. But again, we talked about that a minute ago. You need somewhere to land and take off. And actually, vertiport facilities, generally speaking, many of them will be fairly simple, verti stops or
Yes.
whatever you want to call them. But there
Yep.
will be a need also for more complex facilities providing amenities,
Yes.
services, connections to,
Yes.
first and last miles and else. So there is a question around that as well, of course. Now, I do want to clarify something is that one may see a discrepancy again between the kind of money being invested into the aircraft versus what's going to the infrastructure. Okay, part of that difference of literally order of magnitude does make sense because
Of
the
course.
Hirschberg's rule, right? To any kind of aircraft of any size, and I insist, any number of seats that is
Yes.
made, that is going to be certified for transporting the general public, right? It's about $1 billion, right? 1,000 engineers and a decade or so to get to certification. And
And
that
that's
rule has been
one aircraft.
verified
One
over
aircraft.
and over. And
Yes.
either it's a small VTOL or a large commercial aircraft, it's more or less the same rough order of magnitude, believe it or not.
Yes.
It has been,
Exactly.
again,
Exactly.
verified over and over. A few months ago, I spent some time actually running some numbers. And again, if you correct for inflation and else, that has been verified over and over
Yep.
with so many different kind
Absolutely.
of aircraft size, countries and else. Okay.
And
Now,
this is something we've said over and over again here. Absolutely. We've always said that the
absolutely.
three golden rules of aviation.
Absolutely. Now, a helipad or a vertipad, very simple helipad, ground level, you can do that for less than 100 grants. An
Oh,
elevated
of course.
helipad, on a helideck and else is, let's say you can do something between $500,000 to $5 million,
Yes.
depending
Yeah.
on, again,
Depending on
local
where.
cost.
Absolutely.
Of course, for a verti-hub and else, that's different. It's kind of a small airport. So, but what I'm trying to say here is that, again, when you look at one facility, whatever, VTOL facility versus an aircraft program, it's a completely
Yep.
different order of magnitude. Everything said, again, we said it a few times already. We need an infrastructure in order to make that
Yes.
advanced air mobility emerge. And we see that some of these markets, that may where we might see AAM bloom first, they already have a fairly good, robust infrastructure for accommodating on-demand helicopter transportation. Now we need to see the gap, right, between regular on-demand helicopter transportation and AAM. You already mentioned a few of the items. You need electric chargers. You need to have something that is capacitive, because AAM, the
Yep.
promise of AAM is to do high intensity operations, to fly and
Yes.
fly and fly and fly.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
The closest we can get from that, we have Blade, operating in the greater New York, that kind of the flavor of AAM. You want something, another market, look at Sao Paulo, Brazil. I know I keep, bringing that example every time
I
I talk
know.
about advanced
Yep.
air
That's a
mobility,
perfect
but
example.
pre-pandemic, I don't have fresher figures, but pre-pandemic, we
Yeah.
were talking about 400,000
Yes.
helicopter operations flying over downtown Sao Paulo. That's
Exactly.
more or less the same order of magnitude of the number of aircraft operations at my former airport, Paris Charles de Gaulle, when I left. Can you believe it? 400,000
There you go.
operations.
Yeah. There you
So
go. That's a very good point. Yeah.
you need helipads or vertipads or whatever. You need hubs and else. Look at Sao Paulo, the kind of infrastructure network that exists there. It's a lot of, helipads, most of them elevated, bunch of more complex infrastructure for maintaining those helicopters, but also providing additional amenities and else. And again, if we want AAM to become that big, that big of an operation, that's the sort of thing that we need to see happening elsewhere. Plus, on top of that, the layer that, for charging the eVTOLs and else, all the specificities, if you want, of eVTOL operations that needs to be addressed as well. So yes, there is a gap as of today. New York, Dallas, etc. Name them if you want again to see AAM happen the way we have been envisioning it. Let's say.
Yeah, and I think you made all great points. And to Sao Paulo's point, I think also another thing that was important is the reason why there is such a thriving helicopter business out there is both necessity for one thing, right? The roads, you can't really use them. It's not that great. But also the buildings were designed to have around the hour helicopter flights on top of it, something that we don't necessarily have here. Last time I was in Los Angeles, I looked around and yeah, indeed, there were close to 30, 37 they're emergency helipads, right? And
Right.
so exactly, so that's the big difference. Same thing with garages, right? Remember parking lots like back in 2017, we thought we'd fly from building rooftops to building rooftops, landing on a parking lot. Except, well, guess what? Charging stations are extremely heavy, and on top of having then a transformer, and then you need to have hydrogen, and then you need to have sustainable aviation fuel. That's a lot of weight and a lot of space, which you don't necessarily have on top of these buildings. So one thing that we've been
Yeah.
also pushing for the last few years is to sort of get away from the idea of eVTOL and vertiports only. That's a very difficult business case to make, right? financially, but move more towards how about a multi-port, right? A multi-port now we work with airplanes, helicopters, drones, eVTOLs, eSTOLs, ECTOLs, you name it, it flies. Fine, done deal. And now we can start to make sense of it. But you're right, we'll still need to have these helipads, vertipads, whatever you want to call them. And then another point that you just made that which was interesting because Rex Alexander, who was on the podcast a long time ago, said the same thing. You know what? A helipad, vertistop, if you wish. Yeah, $140,000. I can make you that, and I can put a cone, an air socket, and that's it, done deal. But as you move up, then you need more amenities, then you need more charging, then you need so on and so forth, and that adds up. And of course, it still leads us back to the same question. It's incredible that the vehicle makers can attract billions of dollars of investments, but infrastructure cannot do that. And I think maybe another way of looking at it, especially here in the United States and very different in Europe, and then we can talk about how Europe goes about it because it's a little different, obviously. But over here, the vehicle makers, where they're all modal transportations all put together, they do it on their own. They put everything on their own, everything. But airports, well, they're subsidized, right? I mean, they depend on federal money. And I'm not really sure about railway stations, but I'm assuming more or less the same thing. Roads are, gasoline is, so on and so forth. So there's really this infrastructure philosophy that is subsidized by the government. And of course, that brings a whole new layer of two different players who work in two different fields with two different realities, and yet both of them need each other. So how do we bridge that
Yeah,
gap?
no, absolutely.
I don't know.
And for clarity, I don't necessarily like the word subsidizing because aviation
Yeah.
pays for itself in the United States, right? This is money
Yeah,
that
it
is coming
does.
from
That's
your
good.
plane ticket, right? And
You're right.
what you pay for your gallon of aviation fuel, and it's reinjected into the system.
Yes,
Just for everyone's understanding, that's how it works in the United
that's
States
true.
for the public
That's true.
funding
That's very true.
of commercial airports and GA airports as well. It's again aviation pays
Yep.
for it. But everything said,
Yep.
as you say, there is that big chunk of money that is available for maintaining and developing and enhancing, right? Yes, and so we have that chunk of money, if you want, that is available for maintaining, developing, enhancing our national airspace system and network of airports. But again, it's tied to specific conditions. There is a FAA handbook literally for those, and these conditions, they don't come out of nothing. They come from a
Yes.
congressional mandate.
Yes.
There is, as you may know, there is a task force, multi-agency that is working on, how to support the emergence of advanced air mobility and other advanced aircraft technologies right now. But again, AAM is not necessarily eligible to those funds. Should it be? I don't know. That's
Yeah.
a wild question because again, that money needs to benefit to the NAS and air travel, generally speaking. And one may say that AAM, it's a bit of a niche, at least, at his early stage, it will be a niche. And at the same time, again, I did mention that if you want to create a vertiport facility at an airport to accommodate high intensity operations, this is mobilizing resource from that airport, not just
Yes.
money, also land and else. So what we've seen, at
Energy.
some airports, yes, it's this idea that maybe that vertiport could be funded and developed by others, or even maybe funded and developed by others at the edge of the airport property, not necessarily even at the within the airport property. That's what I've heard from some airport operators. And at the same time, you've seen some interesting model. Look at what's happening right now at MCO, Orlando International
Yep.
Airport, right?
I was going to say Florida is a good example
Yep.
of doing it right. I think, right?
No, I agree. And MCO is not their money being poured into that vertiport project, right? They issued an RFP, and they basically, the idea is to select a developer that is going to basically design, build, and operate that vertiport, right? So the airport is not basically committing money onto that, right? And not taking the risk to
Right.
develop that facility. That's a way also to offset the risk,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not stretch that budget. It's already stretched, right? Let's not stretch it into eventually, potentially, so on and so forth. So that totally makes sense. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You beat me to it. I was going to introduce why Florida gets it, and other states are still talking about it. I mean, when we think of like, when I think of the first three states that come to mind when I think of adventure mobility, predominantly Florida, but I also think of Texas and I also think of Utah. But why Florida in 2023 all of a sudden decided, hey, public interest, vertiports, multiports, money needs to go into that, offload it from the airport? To me, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Everybody should be going,
Hmm.
yes, that's the way to do it. And yet to this day, I don't see any other states doing the same thing. So what makes Florida so unique? And,
Yeah,
and by the way,
and yeah,
and just to clarify, this is what also makes our country so unique, right? Because yeah, you have a federal government and it sort of, tells you to go in one direction, but each state is
but states have an
fully
important role. Yes,
freedom to
absolutely.
do whatever
Yes.
the heck you feel like doing, and for all the right reasons, because traffic in Florida is very different than it is for me here in Savannah, than it is in Texas, than it is in New York, than it is in Washington State. But why is Florida? Why did they get that?
And for the record, of course, Florida has been very active
Yes,
in advanced air mobility, but other states as well. We could talk about North Carolina DOT
North
and what
Carolina,
they've been doing, for instance, with
absolutely.
UAS, for emergency
Yes,
management airlines.
absolutely.
They are part also of passenger air mobility as well, at the forefront of that as well. You just mentioned Washington
Yes,
State, Texas, California, and else. I mean, a lot of states are very involved
Illinois. Yeah, absolutely.
exactly. So, but why Florida? Well, there is that those, if you want, what do you need, right, to be on the top list of the emerging markets for advanced air mobility, right? You need, uh, uh, urban centers,
Right,
that are at a decent distance that can be covered by
right.
eVTOLs. You need a certain power of purchase as well, because again, we could talk about the affordability of AAM for a while. It's not going to replace mass transit, as I still hear sometimes.
Nothing
It's at
does.
the cost to
Nothing
fly.
does. Nothing does come out
Yes,
cheap.
exactly. It's
Okay,
on-demand
get over it.
aviation, and it costs money again to fly aircraft, and for a good reason. You need to pay for that safety, for that experienced pilot and else. But anyway, that's another discussion. Why
Yeah,
Florida? Back to Florida again. There is that interesting setting, if you want, in terms of
yeah.
urban density and spacing of urban centers and else. There is also that vision and support from FDOT, Florida
Yes,
Department
and
of
that's the thing.
Transportation, and that's
FDOT
very
gets
important as
it.
well. When you have a
Absolutely.
state that has a vision for innovation in mobility, and not just AAM, and also other players, other stakeholders that are interested in that. I'm talking
Rail,
about TIA in the Greater Tampa, for instance,
true.
and others. They have that interest in advancing AAM, for good reasons. That helps a lot. That FDOT is, they have that Suntrack facility that is a great test bed for so many technologies, especially when it comes to connecting automatic vehicles, and they want to integrate
Yes.
that
Yeah.
aerial component, if you want, to the facility. Is all that ecosystem that is being supported by the state of Florida, and all that ecosystem of stakeholders, all along the value chain, that is interested
Yes.
in doing something in Florida, and that's very important. Again, it takes a
Yeah, I
team
think.
across all the different domains to make something like AAM happens.
Yeah, and I think, in many ways, you're right. Geographically, Florida is perfect. I mean, the cities there's a golden triangle, they're all there. But Florida is the one state where they actually understand the potential of investor mobility, right? Yeah, it is air, but it's not necessarily air. This is all the mobility points, the dots that cannot be connected by car, by train, by boats, by traditional conventional airplanes or helicopters. That is where AAM really comes in strong. And of course, when you think about it, well, Florida is perfect for that. Geographically, population density, you're right, purchase power is good over there. So I think it will lead the way going forward. In fact, I just printed an article on electricairmobility.news talking exactly about that. Why does Florida get it and others states maybe not as much? But there is a geographical point of importance. I mean, Texas is huge, right? Over here
Hmm.
in Atlanta, I mean, Georgia, where I live, it takes me almost 5 to 6 hours to drive to Atlanta, right? And a flight is 30 minutes, right? If I want to drive to Augusta, it's 2.5 hours of no highways, right? We do have rails, by the way, and that could be easy to put a pendular train on it. We'd be there in a few hours. So we're still working on these things. But The problem is that, well, there's nothing much in between. And that's where things really, and I'm not saying that Macon and Dublin are not great cities, by the way. If you like music, you want to go there. But that's a bigger problem. Florida does not have these problems. So maybe Florida will be sort of the blueprint for the rest of the country. I don't know. We'll see how that comes out. I did want to make a segue into, because we're we both have European roots too. In Europe, things are very different. Airports are not run the same way. Everything is very different. Of course, lots of differences between FAA/DOT and EASA. Tell us a little bit more about how things are being seen in Europe, because for me, it seems more like a top-down kind of decision making, whereas in the United States, it's let's start with an idea and you guys figure it all out down there kind of thing, right? I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but I think it's probably the most diplomatic way of saying it.
No, the business culture is different. The regulatory culture may be a bit different as well. But at the same time, a lot of things have been happening there as well.
Yes.
And if you want to talk about infrastructure, I mean, and even airport operators, they've been pretty involved into those discussions. Again, their
Yes.
top priority is the operations, maintenance, and development of those commercial airports. But it doesn't mean that they don't have any interest in that.
Oh,
You've seen
yes, they
Group
do.
ADP, Aeroporti di Roma, and others, investing, practically
A
speaking,
lot.
investing into AAM infrastructure, right? Or the prospect of doing business in AAM infrastructure, right? So it's happening there as well, with, again, all those caveats that sometimes it might be harder to make things happen there than in the United States. When it comes to
Uh,
doing pilot projects, experimentations, demonstrations, and else, and sometimes it's because of the regulatory burden. Sometimes it's also because of a pushback either from the public or local officials. Again, it's a different context, let's say.
it's a very different color. No, but you said something that is really, I think, to me, is a head scratcher. When you think of the vehicle makers in advanced air mobility, 99% of them are right here in the United States. But when I think of infrastructure, it's in Europe, right? Skyports, Blue Nest, Urban V. I know we know them very well, actually. ADP has been very strong in that. Aeroporti di Roma, same thing. So why is that over here we're focusing on the vehicles, and over there they seem to be focusing more? And not to say that Ascendance Technologie isn't around, right? We do know they're there. By the way, ERC, which I'm really glad to see they're finally up and running, and hopefully will be on the podcast soon enough. It just seems like in Europe, there's the infrastructure. In the United States, the vehicles. Why? And I get it. The geography is different. The structure is very different, but it's bizarre that it turned out to be like that.
Well, again, it might be easier to find investors and to create startups to, do big projects like a new aircraft here in the United States than in Europe. That's one thing.
Yes.
Now, on the infrastructure side, again, I think that why do we have so many ventures and else around the development of AI infrastructure versus the United States? Well, one reason is, again, airports in the United States, most of them are publicly operated.
Yes.
In Europe, they've been privatized, a long time
Privatized
ago.
a long time
And
ago.
they
That's a
think
very
like
different business model. Yeah.
private companies, right? And if they see an opportunity, a business opportunity, they will go after it. Now, everything said, how far are they into investing into AAM infrastructure and committing resources and else? See what I mean? So
Yeah, I
it's
know.
it's easy to create a vehicle, to
Yes,
advertise services around
of course.
AAM, especially if in your mainstream business you have good engineers, designers, planners, and else, for running your traditional airport business. You can have that cross pollination and not necessarily committing fully, those resources to the M business. That's also part of the why, if you want, in my opinion, why we see so many
Such a
companies, if you
difference.
want, around AAM infrastructure in Europe. But it doesn't mean that elsewhere we don't see startups and businesses around AAM infrastructure. And here in the United States, north of the border as well, and other parts of the world,
Yes.
we see champions emerging around not only brick and mortar infrastructure, but if we want to talk about brick and mortar infrastructure, the vertiports, but also the equipment for recharging eVTOLs, the software solutions that you need to
Yes.
enable that advanced air mobility, traffic management that is still in the coming, and but it's coming at some point.
AI, all of it.
Exactly. And also connecting the dots between
Yes.
legacy aviation slash airport solutions or ideas, and how we could inject that into AAM, thinking about collaborative decision making and else, that can benefit as well, not only AAM per se, but the integration of AAM into the broader everything of commercial aviation, right?
Yeah, I think you said it really well, and it's interesting to see how two continents can go about it very differently, approaching the
Yes.
same problem. And by the way, we'll get to the same solutions. There's no doubt about it, right? But how two continents can go so differently. And if you really look really deep down into it, there is a thread. And that thread, I'll leave it up to you guys watching or listening to this to figure out what it is. And if you haven't figured it out, well, you know who to talk to. Come and talk to me. Come and talk to Gael. We'll explain things to you a little bit more in greater depth than what we're doing here today. So, and that's also another thing too that I found really interesting is talking to other regulatory bodies around the planet. One of the last ones I spoke to was in the Emirates, and it was really
Mhm.
fascinating to see. The question was point blank: how do you guys, because your environment is very different, short of the temperatures, but the airspace is different. How do you see advanced air mobility happening? And they said, one of them explained it in such a neat way. I thought, oh, that was perfect. She goes, we're watching EASA, all right, and then we're watching the FAA, and here we are in the middle. So, although we take from EASA a lot, we have our own little special, unique cases there. Same thing in India, same thing in Japan, same thing in Australia. And even my Chinese friends, these guys are probably the luckiest because they have an economy that can just make it sustainable. They don't care. So it's really interesting to see how all of these different regulatory bodies around the world
Yes.
are happening. And last week, by the way, we had ANRA Technologies. We had Brent Clevin from ANRA Technologies, and I found that they found the system. So they have a platform that works anywhere around this planet, and then they just put the right modules around it to make sure it fits with their regulatory bodies. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? That single universal UTM platform, where after that you can say, well, in this case, you need that module, you need that module. So I'm hoping we will find
Yeah.
that, especially on the charging protocols and things like that. Yeah.
No, and I think that you're touching a very important point here is that aviation were a global industry, but also a global community. And
Yes.
we've seen that in both commercial and general aviation is that we've learned so much from that diversity of perspectives and experience. Different regulators, stakeholders from different parts of the world with different approaches of the same problem, but the different contexts also sometimes. All
True.
of that, it's a huge value in terms of cross-pollination and learning from each other. We've seen that in flight safety, in operational efficiency, in the design of aircraft, airports, whatever. We learn so much, from talking to our folks, our colleagues from different parts of the world. And that's what makes us stronger, safer, and more efficient. And I
Yes.
think will be the same for AAM. That's why it's so important to talk to each other, across the different
Oh
regions,
gosh, yes.
across the different cultures and else. It's because again, it's AAM is emerging fast, and we need to learn
Fast.
fast.
Yes.
And one way to do that, it's again, share perspectives, ideas, and lessons learned.
It's such a great point, because the one thing that I'm still very sad about is you have
Yes.
three poles in advanced air mobility. The passenger vehicles, they get all the publicity and even the money. Then you have the drone guys, and they're on their own. They're like, whatever, we know we're going to be first, like that. And then you have the infrastructure, and we're like, need money, need money, need money. But all three of them need to be working together, because they will
Absolutely.
be
Yes.
working together. You don't have
Yes.
a choice. You cannot work without that. That cannot work without any of that. And perhaps drones and passenger vehicles, they can operate very differently, but ultimately you'll be operating from the same place, guys. So yeah, we used to have a lot more, I think, talking or communicating before. Now we're sort of seeing, companies get a little bit more serious, but we need to continue that momentum of talking and having panels where everybody gets on
Yeah.
stage and talks about it. So
Especially again, if at some point we want to shift from small scale experiments, if you want, to
yes.
something that is really mainstream. And you were just talking about drones and else. Uh, think about the lower space, how it's going to get busy. You will have
Yes.
drones delivering stuff. You will have uncrewed, eVTOL, eSTOL, whatever, flying without pilots, from A
Yep.
to B to deliver cargo and else. You will have, at least
Yep.
at first, piloted passenger
Yes.
eVTOLs, stores and else, Plus, let's not forget the legacy users. There are still things happening in the lower space. There are still aircraft. There are already
Exactly.
aircraft flying, and the goal is not to obliterate, deprive, those
Oh no, no, no,
users
no,
from
no, no.
access to the
Yeah,
airspace. We need to make things happen for everyone. We need to share that resource that the airspace and airports as well are. And again, AAM, it's part of the future of aviation. It's not
it is.
the future of
It
aviation. We
is
need to think of
not.
the 99
Yes.
remaining percent of it as well.
Yeah.
So that's very important. And it's not just for the lower space as well. It's also when it comes to accessing airports. That's a big question that I'm being asked all the
Yes.
time by
Yes.
our airport
Yes.
clients is
Yes. Yes.
what
Yes.
will be the impact of AAM on capacity and delay? If the trade-off is there will be more delay for commercial flights, that's a big no-no. So it has to be a soft integration of AAM into existing operations. Otherwise, we're running into some serious issues, if you want, in terms of
Yes.
peaceful coexistence between all of those activities.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. AAM is a intermobility solution. That's what it
Mhm.
is. And it happens to be by air. I mean, it could have happened any other ways, but yeah, it's efficient and it works this way. And actually, you remind me of something a few years ago. You invited me on one of your studies where a lot of stakeholders came in and you were asking us questions about
Oh,
how
yes.
important is it, remember, how important is it that the hail riding taxis are closer or further away than and everything. And that's the kind of stuff that happens at the infrastructure level, which I personally find extremely exciting because I was going to say something horrible. Not to say that vehicles are limited, but vehicles are fascinating, right? I mean, aircraft are fascinating to start with, but I find that the infrastructure is extremely rich in complexities because it's not just a landing pad. It's not just a runway. It's not just a stall port. It's where do the cars go and park? How close is it
Yes.
to recharging? How do we integrate light rail into this whole idea? Is there enough electricity or energy to bring in here? Do we have to have local energy and storage and everything? What does the uncrewed traffic management and does it integrate with ATM? How will ATC handle it? And then you have to start thinking about, well, all the local zoning restrictions that you may or may not have around firefighting, EMS, military, police. Wow, it is such a complex, multi-dimensional
Absolutely.
jigsaw puzzle that to me it dwarfs any other kind of technologies around it, and hence to me that should be such a given for all the investors. They should just go and go, wow, this is really where it's at. And yeah, it is. And in the long
It's
run,
a
that's
very
really
rich
where
value chain.
everything it is. It's a very rich value chain, exactly. And I think that sometimes we kind of just get sidetracked by the shiny objects. And yes, I mean, my God, I've been close to all of them. I've seen a lot of eVTOLs fly, and man, it's amazing. Did I tell you I
Yes.
was at Salinas in Joby, and we saw the S4 fly? And it was funny
Oh,
because you could
cool.
only hear it for about 100 feet as it was taken
Hmm.
off, but then you couldn't hear anything except for the chaser. And at one point, a big Sikorsky came in at the same time. All three of them were in the air, and it was amazing. But you know what? The only thing we heard was the Sikorsky, right? Obviously, a heavy, big helicopter. But it really made me understand how this is important. This is a multi mobility solution here that's congealing slowly together. And by the way, train stations of the E's and F's were already designed as big cities with underground railing system and parking lots and
Hmm.
tons of stores and everything. And we're sort of revisiting this when we think of Verta hubs and these beautiful, lavish Verta hubs that we used to have. These drawings, I miss these drawings. They were so, they made me dream. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's
Gael,
interesting that vision of urban vertical flight is not necessarily
yeah.
new, but now it's finally coming through. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if it was as easy as painting an H, on top of a parking garage, it would already have happened. We were talking about parking garages and else, and just for everyone's benefit here, again, if you're thinking about creating a vertiport on top of a parking garage or parking facility, there are a lot of different parameters to be taken into consideration. It's not
Oh,
just
yes.
about the bearing load, if you want. It's also about downwash, outwash. It's about
Yes.
fire prevention and suppression. It's about access. It's about so many different things. So many different things. I know there are very cool renderings out there, including from us, but
Yeah, of
it
course.
may look simple. It's not that simple.
Well, and it's a good point you're making, because it has to look appealing to the public. And this is something I've done, by the way, for the last 20 years, is I'm always talking to engineers and founders and everything, and I
Yes,
understand what they're trying to do, but then I turn around and I have to explain it to the public. So how do you make something that is extremely complicated palpable
yes,
and excited to the public? And it's something I'd love to do, because that I get it. I totally get it. Another thing too, when we talk about parking lots, right? Whether they're multi-leveled or not. Have you ever noticed they're usually inside a city, in the middle of buildings and everything? So, hey, dropping in from that's a lot of energy to get out of it again. So, downwash, outwash. Yes, there's a lot. It's extremely complicated. I think most people have no idea how complicated infrastructure can be, and for me, that's why it's so exciting. And I've always loved it. I've
absolutely.
always been part of it for the last 20 years. It's been great. Gael, we're getting into the part where we start to get a little bit more personal here. But tell us a little bit
Uh-huh.
about your motivation. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you do what you do?
Well, we have an hour,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, a nice
The short,
encyclopedia.
the short version. I'm a pure aviation product. I've always been fascinated by aviation. As a child, I knew I would want to work in that field, and especially as an engineer. I'm a pure aviation engineering product. And what excites me is it's what aviation brings to the world. We might not realize that, every day, but the unique mobility that aviation brings to the world, it's something that no other transportation mode can do it. And I love trains. I love
Oh yeah, me too.
ground
Yeah,
transportation technologies and else. But when it comes to ship bunch of people or a load from A to B, across mountains or rivers or whatever at high speed, it's aviation
yeah,
and
yeah,
nothing else.
yeah,
And it's not just about air travel. It's also about emergency services. It's about emergency relief. It's about
yes.
so many other use cases for that great technology that
Safety.
aviation is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And connecting people together, making things happening in terms of business opportunities and else. One example that I like to mention is that the country of Costa Rica, for instance, they made the
Mm,
decision,
yes.
to
Yes.
preserve their land and to basically
Yes.
ban any, mineral extraction operations on their land. But they need money
Wow.
to live, right?
Of
So,
course.
and to keep improving, their, way of life and else. So what they decided is to turn to green tourism.
Yes. Green
Fantastic.
tourism.
How do you
Fantastic.
bring tourism in Costa Rica?
Aha. And that's the problem.
You need aircraft for that. So
You need an
yes,
aircraft for
aircraft can
that.
be an ally, to sustainable development, to making our world better and else. Of course, it has negative externalities like anything else. So
Hey, look,
now our role
what
is
comes
to,
out of my mouth? Carbon dioxide, okay? Come on. All
that is true.
right? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have our duty, of course, to make aviation more sustainable. And
Of
as an
course.
industry, I think we have a plan for that. But again, I'm very proud and excited to be part of the aviation community. And yeah, that's what makes me, you know, wake up in the morning and go to work. And it's again keep aviation alive, making sure that aviation for all happens. And that we can keep innovating. For everyone. All around the world and all across the country
Yeah.
for this regard.
That's actually, you said it really well, and you're right. Costa Rica actually has done a lot of great things there, and our friends at Blueness has done a lot of great work over there, and
And that's
certainly
just one
shown.
example. That is
That's
just one
just one
example,
example.
of course.
Exactly.
If you want to learn more about that, actually, December 24, we released a great study called The Future of Airports, a vision of 2040 and 2070, right? And it's not just about airports. We talk about aviation, generally speaking, and
Yes.
you can find great contents on that if you want to learn more about, again, what aviation brings to the world and how we can, uh, you know, make aviation more sustainable and beneficial to more people, of course, all around the
You
world.
know what? Maybe this is something I'm going to put up on electricairmobility.news, like a sort of a
Aha.
library of where you can get a lot of these things, and I'll get all the downloads. I've read a lot of what you guys have put out there, and it is really well done.
Oh, thank you.
The next question, I don't know if you want to talk about that. We can always edit it out, but you come from a long lineage of airplane people. Like your family goes back didn't you tell me like you were somehow related to an early French airplane designer or something like that? I kind of thought I remember seeing that in some discussion we were having, or was it an online discussion somebody was talking about? I can't remember. And if not, then I totally hallucinated it.
Yeah, actually, I'm the first aviation person in my family, but I don't think
Y-
it's a pure hallucination. I don't think it's a pure hallucination. It's because there is Jean-Marie Le Bris, same name, same
That was
family
it.
name,
That
who
was it.
very little known, but it's a pioneer of aviation, and it's
Yes, that was
most
it.
likely the very first person flying in heavier than air, and doing an ascending
Yes.
flight. That happened in
Yep.
the late 19th century.
Yep.
In Finistère, Penarbet, Western
Finistère. Yep. Yep.
Brittany, and it was a glider, okay, but it had that vision of an aircraft, and you look at the model, and it looks actually like one of those early aircraft that will fly a few decades later, with an engine. And
Yes.
part of his vision was actually to leverage that technology in order to do search and rescue at sea, because he was a seaman, that was his background, and he funded that glider on his own money, got a bit of support, but basically did everything on his own. Great story, great personal story from Jean-Marie Le Bris. And again, he's one of the pioneers of aviation, but unfortunately, that's a little known story that deserves more visibility, in my opinion.
That was it. That was the thing. I'm sorry. And I automatically
No problem.
assumed that it was yours, but that's something
We
we need
share the same
to a
family
little
name.
bit. Yeah, I know. I know. It's something we need to do a little bit more research on. All right. For the
Absolutely.
very last question, what would you like people who are listening to us or watching us, what would you like for them to walk away from everything that we've talked about today? I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay. Well, advanced air mobility is finally happening in very concrete words and terms, I think. Again, the EIPP, the FAA EIPP, that program that is going to
Yeah.
create pilot projects across the nation, bringing all kind of different stakeholders together to make things happen, to test, AAM and see how it can happen. I think it's going to help advance air mobility a lot, So again, it's coming. It's very exciting. I would say keep, educating yourself about AAM, because there is a lot of buzz around it. But you know what? Go out there, see a demonstration, make an
Yes.
opinion on your own, about all those questions about noise, about, what it can bring, to your community and else. Again, an eVTOL is a very different thing that a conventional helicopter. It's still on-demand aviation when it comes to advanced air mobility, but in a very different way that
Yes.
with today's helicopters. And there are all these use cases that will be built around advanced air mobility as well, that are beyond the pure on-demand service, if you want. It's coming soon. It's coming strong. It's coming near to you. So again, I encourage everyone to learn about advanced air mobility and to make your own opinion about that very exciting innovation that is coming to you very soon.
Yeah, and I think especially so if you're young, you're in school, you don't know, you are attracted to aviation. Let us tell you that the future of aviation
Aviation
is
is not just
rich.
about flying aircraft.
Yes, absolutely. Well said.
It's all the
Absolutely.
ecosystem around that. It's good paying
Absolutely.
job, incredibly good paying jobs for
Yes.
everyone, from the
Yes.
mechanics to the pilots
Yes.
to the flight
Absolutely.
planner, flight scheduler, whatever, and else. It's yeah.
Energy,
When I
everything.
was talking about what aviation brings to the world, it's that as well. It's a whole aviation ecosystem,
Yes.
everything
Yeah.
that innovation around aviation enables for other domains, and again, all those good paying jobs, and for all kind of different background degrees and else, you can get into the aviation business, from your community college or else. Again, learn about aviation. So many great opportunities, and it's a great family. It's so exciting, and so many opportunities to move across domains from a job to another and else, depending of what you like, what you want to do with your future and else. If you are young folk, listening to that podcast, learn about job opportunities, career opportunities in aviation. You will never regret your choice if you decide to join aviation. I never heard
No,
anyone
I
saying,
never.
I regret to that I made that choice and that now I work in aviation. It's a
I
great
never
family,
regretted it.
very exciting jobs and else.
12 years ago, I switched over. I never regretted it, not once. I mean, there are tough times, but overall, no. And shameless plug, where would you want to, where do you want to go to learn about these things? Well, hey, here's a great podcast that we have here. It's called The Ways We Move. This is exactly where you can find out a lot about mostly aviation, but we do try to talk about other things. And of course, the other sister website, electricairmobility.news. Gael, thank you so much for taking the
Thank you,
time to be
Nicolas.
with us. And I really appreciate it because I know your schedule is tight. You've got a
Oh,
lot of
please.
work. You got a lot on your plate, but
Always
we
a
also
pleasure.
appreciate everything that WSP does, and certainly look forward to writing a little bit about that so that people can see where else they can
Absolutely.
go and get some more information, all that. Gael, thank you very much. Please come back
Thank you,
whenever you
Nicolas.
want. It's an
Thank you, everyone.
open invitation. Absolutely. And then I look forward
Don't say it
to
twice.
seeing you again in a
Absolutely.
year.
Fly safe, everyone.
Thanks.